Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS-Inform. I'm your host, Bill Potter. We're very honored again to have in the studio, as we do on Fridays during legislation, State Senator Mark Messmer. Senator, welcome to the show.
Great to be here once again. Good to be home on a Friday.
Well, you had a pretty busy week this week.
It was. This was the last week of the Senate working on House bills and the House working on Senate bills. And as always happens, at the when you get to this time of the schedule, the days get long, people get tired and edgy, and patience wears thin, and
it's a good thing there's no real crazy controversial issues this year.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, it'd really be fun.
Yeah, but just the process of when you deal with the budget bill and the transportation bill, and and seems like all the controversial bills get stacked up, which happens at the first half of session. It happens at the second. Everything kind of piles up. We had 63 bills we voted on this week, which was, we probably did 150 to 175 total. So so that was a lot of long days, and it's that time of year that happens every year during budget year,
right?
And we're all glad to be home today. we'll all be glad when the next 2 weeks are done and we're done, but. Just part of the process, happens every time, and so you kind of expect it. But the two big issues we tackled, which really are the heart and meat of the session, the transportation funding bill, House Bill 1002, we finished up on Wednesday, and the House and Senate versions are a little bit different, and so that'll go to conference committee. Next week they'll start working on, on the differences between the two versions. They had the biggest difference. They took about $300 million of sales tax from the general budget and allocated it to road funding, which then left a $300 million hole in the general fund budget. So then they had a cigarette tax increase to cover the hole by shifting more sales tax to roads. And I guess, our philosophical side on the Senate side has been, we don't dedicate any other segment of society that we charge sales tax on, whatever it is. We don't say, well, that particular service, that particular area of the business world, we collected 7% of the sales tax on that activity, so we're going to spend 7%, that money on that activity. And so we've always been hesitant to shift, any more than the current. I think we do about $150 million a year already on sales tax, general fund revenue, every year to the road funding bill. They wanted to do another $300 million, of that, which creates budget, shortfalls and other tax increases you have to do. So ours did not include any sales tax shifting, and it did not include any cigarette tax that had to go hand in hand with that. We do have both a 10 cent per gallon, it's a flat 10 cents per gallon increase. Currently there's 18 cents per gallon, charged on gasoline, diesel. If you have compressed natural gas, the equivalent gallonage rate of that. If you have propane, all of those have the same basic per gallon, charge to them. And so we had a 10 cent increase. They did it 10 cents, all in 1 year. We split it into over 2 years, 5 cents this year, 5 cents next year. Not a big difference. Our thought process is, okay, we know we got projects identified we want to do. You can't get them all done starting July 1st anyway. A lot of them have engineering work to be done, a lot of right-of-way work to be. There's a lot that has to happen when you've got the revenue on the way. There's a lot of things. It just takes time to ramp up to get there. So we just broke it into 5 cents per year, for the next 2 years. We both had a $150 electric car fee in each programs, and a $15 registration, plate renewal fee for everybody. We added a $75 hybrid car fee, which was in the House bill last year, that they had worked on some gas tax increases last year that got pulled back. They didn't have the hybrid car fee in it this year. We added it in the Senate. And we added a $100 per commercial, semi truck, $150 per commercial fleet fee in ours. To not having the sales tax shifting, we looked at some other ways to to generate that. The heavy truck haulers, their industry group, approved of that. So I mean, that was something they thought. I mean, the heavy trucks by far, probably by order of magnitude of 100 to 1, as far as damage to roads. They know they're a heavy contributor, to wear and tear on the road. So they were not opposed to things that were going to pull them into a little bit heavier funding of it. So that we had in ours, they didn't have it in the House version. We'll when the revenue numbers come in next week, the final revenue projections, we'll see what exactly there is to work with, exactly how the percentages of the overall funding that comes in, how much of that'll be sent to local government versus state, INDOT versus the county and city road funds. Those details all will get squished around the next 2 weeks, and the highway funding bill will probably be one of the last things we deal with on the last day of session, along with the budget. So, and the only bill we have to do every 2 years is the budget, and that was we passed that on Thursday, yesterday. House Bill 1001 is always the budget bill number during budget years, and that one we both had overall spending about the same, because we had to work off the same revenue forecast numbers from December. We allocated about 75 million more to K through 12 education than they had in theirs, which will take all of the funding numbers for all the schools up another roughly 0.5% to everybody, which we felt like we wanted to prioritize that a little more than they had in the House budget, but primarily because we didn't shift sales tax to roads. We had a little bit more money to allocate into other categories, where since they took 300 million and took it out of the general fund and put it into the road funding mix, they just had less money to allocate to all all of the agencies. And we added some money to Child and Protective Services budget, to get more caseworkers hired that they didn't have. We have more money in K through 12 spending, and we've got some veteran programs in our budget that weren't in the House budget. Obviously, next week when the revenue numbers come in, we'll find out exactly where all. I mean, once we know if we took our projections and there's more coming than we thought, we can both probably do more with the different programs we're funding. But both budgets were truly balanced budgets. They both pay down debt. The state does have some buildings that are have bonds taken out to construct the buildings. We both had paying off debt on bonds that are taken out, and both have about 600 to 700 million put in to fund state retirement accounts, the pension funds. We've probably got about 10 more years of putting about 600 to 700 million a year, into the state retired teachers, retired state employees, pension funds that are normally, if you know your future liability is, say whatever, $50 billion, and you've got 80% of that covered in your pension funds, they consider that solvent or solid, solidly funded. To get that state retired worker, teacher pension fund pool up to that 80% level, we've been, for the last few years, been putting about 600 to 700 million a year, into that fund to build it up. Have about 10 more years of that to go, and then that one will be considered, stable. It's still, I mean, it's not horribly under, but not that 80% level that they like it to be. So all of that.
Why is there a deficit in that to begin with?
Just because what they had put in years ago, they weren't depositing enough into that 5, 10, 20 years ago, and then as your baby boomers start to hit retirement age, you got more people pulling out than you have putting in.
Okay.
So if there's contributions by local government, by state, I mean, if there's money being contributed, as part of the the current employee mix, what was put in 5, 10, 20 years ago wasn't enough to keep pace with the baby boomers that are now, 60, 70. I mean, that age of people are pulling from the fund, and it's not enough to make it, actuarially sound. So we're putting extra money into that. Every year I've been there, we've stuck more money into that to help catch up for what they didn't put in heavily enough. They should have looked at the demographics then and said, in 19...
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
What we did in 1990 and 2000, when you get to 2015, 2020, we're going to need more money then, because just looking at the age of our employees and the age of the population as a whole, but we're catching up.
Now, the transportation and the budget bill, there's two different versions in each house.
Yep.
Who gets together and hammers that out? It's not the whole Senate.
No.
The whole
You'll have, on the budget, it'll be Senator Kenley, who's our appropriations chairman, and Tim Brown, who's the House Ways and Means chairman. They'll be the primary conferees on that bill.
Okay.
And then you'll have probably, Tim Lannon is the Senate minority leader, and Tim Pelath is the House. I mean, they'll either be that person or they'll assign somebody, but you'll have a Democrat and Republican from House and Senate that'll make up that conference committee that'll work on squishing those on the budget. And then on the transportation bill, it was Ed Soliday in the House and Mike Kreider in the Senate. And I'd imagine Brent Hirschman, would be, he's our tax and fiscal guy. He's the one that transportation bill would have gone through his committee too. So there'll be a Democrat, Republican, House and Senate committee set up for both of those bills, and
kind of say, okay, look, I'll give here, you give there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Right. Here's what we passed. Here's what you passed. What are you willing to give up? What am I willing to give up? A lot of it'll just they'll meet in the middle.
And one more thing is I think at the beginning of the year we talked about there probably won't be anything about alcohol sales this year. However, there was something that did come up.
Something popped up,
yeah.
And really, I hope it wasn't the main source of media attention here, because when we look at all of the time and energy spent on the big issues that we thought coming in were going to be the budget and the road funding, and in reality it's consumed the vast majority of time, energy, and resources of focusing on those issues. Well, the last few weeks, an issue came to the General Assembly's attention that a convenience store in Columbus and Muncie, owned by Ricker's Convenience Stores, they have, I think, 56 stations around the state. They decided they were going to be creative and bought some restaurant licenses that were available in their counties, and took a convenience store and cleared out about half the shelves and put in 25 chairs and a few tables, because our definition in our laws of what a restaurant is pretty minimal. Okay. So they've got some Mexican food available, tacos and burritos, and some tables and chairs, and so they qualified as a restaurant. Now, the Alcohol Tobacco Commission is supposed to look at your application and say, what is the character of your business? What do you truly do at this place of business? Are you a restaurant? Are you a hardware store? Are you a gas station? Are you a clothing store? Because we even found out there's some high-end clothing stores and hardware stores who have gotten a restaurant permit. They have basically a snack counter in their place of business and bought an available restaurant license and are using it to sell hard liquor, wine, and cold beer for carryout or consumption on premises in places that were never intended.
And on Sundays.
And on Sundays.
Okay. Tricky. Okay.
Creative, I'll call it creative. But we're not aware that the ATC had approved those permits. Should have never, because they're supposed to say, what is the character of your business? What are you predominantly doing? If you're a restaurant, it's pretty clear you're a restaurant. If you're something else, it's pretty clear you're something else. And for 50 years, That's been the standard that they use. Well, sometime this past year, somebody decided we're going to ignore that part of the law, and just because you have 25 chairs and serve some type of food, you're now a restaurant, and give them a 3-way alcohol permit for beer, wine, and liquor, and cold carry out and 7 days a week, and unintended application of our, what we all understood our laws to be. So I worked with Senator Alting. There was the House Public Policy Chairman. Everybody worked on and spent a lot of time discussing the issue with our restaurants in our area. Of what, how can we better define it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think the language we came up that seemed to satisfy all the, everybody who's legitimate in the restaurant business. And we checked people, all the way down to the, Ohio River border counties with Kentucky, checked with people all across my district, all across the state. And what we seemed to come up with a definition that deals with that, the restaurant alcohol sales. The definition we set up is, if your overall alcohol sales, if 60% of it is consumed in the restaurant, in the bar, and no more than 40% of it is carry out, then you'll meet our definition of a restaurant. And the lobbyists from the attorneys from the Ricker's convenience stores said, well, we can never meet that. I said, well, and they're not going to take away their current license. They'll be able to maintain what they're doing until they come up for renewal next year. And they said, well, only about 10% of our consumption is in the premises, and 90% is going out the door. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They were never intending to be a restaurant. They were intended to be a packaged liquor store using a restaurant license as a cover.
Oftentimes I wonder, you would think by now we've got all of our laws in place, and when you guys have your legislation, you should maybe pass 1 or 2 laws. That should be all that should come up.
You would think.
But you say there's 100 and some that you passed.
Well,
that's why, because we're kind of cleaning up some of things, and times change.
They do. Times change, and I would say there's probably around 150 to 175 House and Senate bills, and some of them are really the same issue that 2 different people authored, and but of all the bills we pass, 2/3 of them, 3/4 of them, maybe more, are just going through an existing set of law and saying, well, this needs to be updated because things change in society. A program's not working, a program's not needed anymore, you get rid of statutes. I mean, a lot of it is just updating what's already on the books. You're just updating, refining, making it meet current, because technology changes, society as a whole changes. So a lot of what we do is just updating things that are already law, but need to be changed and tweaked.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you so much for
You're
coming
welcome.
in. Our guest has been State Senator Mark Messmer, as he joins us every Friday during the legislation. Look forward to having you back next week. Thank you for watching WJTS in Form. We're local people watching local people.